Right. It's super, it's heavy, and it also, when we just run through it in Hebrew, it's also with the same as so, with your permission, just where my friend came over to me. Okay. Because I brought her one. This is a true Rabbi for Human Rights, which I'm sure. Well, you can order them from True Yeah, trueUp.org.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah. And if you can't find them, you know how to reach them.
Community-based.
Right.
They were here last night. Oh yes, he was here last night.
And he,
I don't think I have kids. Yeah, we were like, hi.
So he's kind of like me. I haven't been there. I mean, I've been there, but I don't know. Good morning, Shana Tova. Good to meet you. Hi, Roger. Hi, Joshua. Good to see you again, my fellow Nashvilleian. Okay.
Now it's warm in the sun.
It feels good. I didn't like I brought my black leggings, but I didn't bring my leggings. So I was like, because you're our fancy schmancy people, you know.
You need a nap?
All right, I
Have we done that yet?
Although it would be much more fun if we just kind of hung out together. I would like to hang out.
It's a new
Absolutely. Okay. I'm gonna prepare myself.
yes, right? You just want to scoot over in the okay. Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
You know what? If they want to, they can. And if they don't want to, they don't have to. Were you here last night? No.
People usually settle where they want to settle.
This area just
It's nice to meet you guys.
Spend the summer.
Oh,
Thank you for taking yourself, Maggie, and thanks for your support.
and I always say, but I'm from Montana. Yeah.
Oh, really?
He's 90 miles east.
Yeah, I was there 2 or 3 years.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah.
We just had it.
In Dallas. In Austin. One in Dallas.
Blessings flow into the world from the source of life. Be a vessel for the love song of God. Blessings flow into the world from the source of life. Be a vessel for the love song of God. Matovu. Ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkanotecha Yisrael. Matovu. Ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkanotecha Yisrael. Blessings flow into the world from the source of life. Be a vessel for the love song of God. Blessings flow into the world from the source of life. Be a vessel for the love song of God. Good morning.
Good morning.
Shana Tova. Happy, healthy, sweet, loving, gentle new year. And you're all, aren't you? Well, not for Beth. Okay, all right. So I will count on you to take care of yourself as you need to take care of yourselves. I will invite you to disconnect unless you are the person who is responsible for the technology to get us to other people. I invite you to disconnect from your technology, disconnect from all those things that are connecting you outside of this ohel, this. We sing in the morning, every morning, we sing Matovu, how good and how meaningful it is for us to be together in community, especially when we have very adorable people with Annie's and a beautiful dress. So it just, from our youngest people in our communities to our very most mature people in our communities. The older I get, the more I'm loving this aging process. Thank God we get to do this. So here, Ohel, in this tent that gives us a sense of community, and we can connect within this community. And so I invite you into connection, into the new year. And I share with you a poem that was shared with me in 5774 from a really dear friend of mine who didn't go to rabbinical school with me, but went with me to this very crunchy granola groovy thing in Western Connecticut, where I got the holy chutzpah to finally become the rabbi that I had wanted to be since I was 7 years old, when the first woman was ordained in North America, Sally Priesand. And I met Julie, now Rabbi Julie Benioff, who's out in Oregon. I met her, and she shared with me a slichot booklet that her congregation in Alaska had put together. And this is written, it's so important in our tradition to give kavod, to give honor to those who wrote the words, if you can do that. So that's why I'm always telling you who wrote this. This was written by a woman I don't know, whose name is Judith Sarah Schmidt. And I made some modifications in 5774, and since it's now 5782, I have no idea what those modifications are, but it's mostly hers. And it's called Elul to Ne'ilah. So actually, we can go home after this, because this will have taken us from the month of Elul, the month that precedes the Hagim, all the way to the closing of the gates that we'll do next week. After a day, a long 25-hour day of Yom Kippur, we close the gates with Ne'ilah. From Elul to Ne'ilah. The colors of the flowers are becoming quiet. A ripe apple falls gently, like love, into my hands. Bees gather their last honeyed harvest. All is wrapped in stilled tenderness. Crossing over, the ferry master cautions us to hold our ears as the horn blasts through the morning fog. I do not cover my ears. I let it be a shofar sound circling me in these last days of summer toward the harvesting of my heart, to search and weigh and sort golden songs, amber silences, flowering fallen seeds, the lost and found, and never to be found of this year, this life. Chesed, kindness hands, hands of compassion, raise up. The shofar's cry lifts the heart like a lamb bleating prayers of praise for the plenitude of these days, bleating prayers of tears for the starving, the sick, the senseless bloodshed of this year, the pain of hate and violence, the gnawing of apathy and antipathy, the dissonance of multiple realities, the angst of not knowing where to stand, what to say, what to do. Awaken us to peace, your slumberers. Remember us to peace, your forgetters. Return us to peace, your yearners. Prepare us, spare us, love us. Pierce our hearts to come open toward the celestial bodies that have witnessed our righteousness, our transgressions, our ambiguity, our complacency, our silence. The opening of the book of life, the promise of the Ne'ilah gates, receive us into your place, Hamakom, that we may renew and re-aim your seed offerings, plant us anew into this new year. And as evening descends on that last night, as the gates of heaven begin to close, rock us gently, wrap us just a little longer in the lingering scent of the infinite flowering of your love. So I invite us as seedlings being planted into this new year to open our machzor to page, let's move on to page 5. And in the middle of page 5, I hope it's your page 5, it's my page 5, there are the words, Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. So this word Tahora in Hebrew can be complicated because we're first introduced to it in the book of Leviticus. And in rabbinical school, I took an entire semester class called Learning to Love Leviticus because it's a hard book. It is a book of a lot of rules and laws, and some of them seem antiquated, and we're used to this concept of Tahora, and we're told in English that it really means purity. And so if something is tahor, it is pure, and otherwise it is impure. I mean, what's the opposite of pure? Impure. But really what it means is something that is really, really special, and something that is just ordinary in the course of our lives, something that just naturally happens. But when we make something tahor, or when the divine mystery creates something within us that is tahor, it is that kind of purity, that kind of specialness. So we say every morning in our liturgy that we are grateful for this soul breath that is implanted within us, that it is special in this pure, special sort of way. So I'm going to introduce a tune from my teacher, Reb Hannah Tiferet. And if you don't know this tune, We'll find one that you know for next week. And I invite you just to either listen or read the words in English, whatever is on your heart, or just look at the extraordinary day. You guys get a lot of extraordinary days out here. So I'm delighted to be here with you. Elohai nishama shenatata tehorahi. Elohai nishama shenatata tehorahi. And while I sing, I invite you to find a place in your body that is feeling like it needs a little bit of extra love from you. And invite you to put your hand there, and then to put your other hand in a place that evokes soul for you. For me, it's here. For you, it may be somewhere else. Elohai nishama shenatata tehorahi. 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 My God, this soul you implanted in me, so pure is she. My soul that you implanted in me, so pure is she. Elohai nishama shenatata tehorahi. So I love our Jewish morning liturgy. I think it's delicious, and I think that it is much more embodied in lots of ways. We're told that we're a people of the book, and we are a bookish lot, and yet we're also a people of the land. And that's how we started. We were a nomadic, tribal people who were tied deeply to the land. And in this year that we have ahead of us, this Shemitah year, as we talked about last night, this year of release of the land, of ourselves, we have an opportunity to really embody that practice. And when we turn to page 6, 7, and 8, we have the words of Birchot HaShachar, the verse of morning praise, the blessings of the morning. And my understanding from Rabbi Francine is that you go back and forth in Hebrew and in English with this, and I hope that my tune is the same as the one that you use. If it's not, we'll work on that for next week. Or you can just sing along with me in whatever tune you have in your head. These are Jewish calisthenics, these blessings. I mean, they really are. It used to be that these were the blessings that one said when one first woke up. So the first thing that you would say is, you've given me the opportunity to discern day and night, because the light is coming up and now I can see the difference. Some of our sages said it's that when we can see the blue, the techelet, had techelet on our tzitzit, it was when we could from the rest. Others of our sages determine the face of a friend. But at some point we have that opportunity to discern, and then we start to move, and we when we have this saying about that we are girded with strength. It was really about putting on one's belt, really. So I invite you to stand for these blessings. Or if you don't want to stand, to just kind of raise yourself up and embody the blessings as we're reading them. You can see them in English and in Hebrew and in transliteration. So let's do this together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lana livditchen ben yom uven laila. You are the source of blessing, Adonai, my God. You made me in your sacred image. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani Yisrael. You made me a God wrestler. But you are the source of blessing, Adonai. You made me a free person. Baruch atah Adonai haolam pokeach ivrim. You are the source of blessing, Adonai. Your great power clothes the naked. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim. You are the source of blessing, Adonai. Your great power lifts up the fallen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam rokach haaretz al hamayim. You are the source of blessing, Adonai. Your great power has made all that I need. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechim mitzadei gaver. You are the source of blessing, Adonai. Your great power strengthens our people with courage. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oter Yisrael b'tifarah. You are the source of blessing, Adonai. Your great power gives strength to the weary. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hama'avir sheinai meinai utnuma me'achapai. And you can. So all through the month of Elul, it's traditional to recite Psalm 27. And it's also traditional to blow shofar every morning, except for on Shabbat. So I have lots of different translations of Psalm 27, but there is none that I like more than the one that you have right here in the Machzor that Rabbi Francine prepared for you. And this is from my teacher, Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi, of blessed memory. He was the founder of Jewish Renewal, which is, we were talking this morning, just as we were chit-chatting about the fact that that your community is a community that is pan-denominational, that you have people who have come to this community from all of the streams of Judaism. And you have people, I am sure, who have come to this community, wisdom traditions outside of the streams of Judaism, or that have branched off of the streams of Judaism. And renewal considers itself to be pan-denominational, or even post-denominational, because there are parts of this way of renewing Judaism, of bringing back all of the joy of Hasidism, not the modern Hasidism that you may be familiar with, but the places where Hasidism started, the places where it started in Tzfat, this mystical tradition, and then it continued. Those who kept the intellectual part of Judaism away from the rest of us folks. Or that should be we folks. Anyway, so that's the kind of Hasidut that Jewish renewal draws from. And it's also a tradition, a growing tradition, and not very old tradition, that really brings the earth, Gaia consciousness, as Reb Zalman would talk about. And here was this Reb Zalman, who was born in pre-Shoah, pre-Holocaust Europe, who got very involved after he emigrated before the Shoah, or right before World War II was starting. He came to the United States and was very involved with Chabad. He was sent out by the Chabad Rebbe with somebody whose name we know from a lot of our singing, Shlomo Karlbach, and they were sent out basically doing what Chabad does, like, getting people to come and enjoy Judaism. And then Reb Zalman kind of took a real turn in the 60s, and he was kicked out of his Orthodox community, and because he was really interested in exploring other paths and other ways, and he spent a lot of time with other religious traditions, not because he didn't love his Judaism, but because he felt, and I feel, that Judaism is like an organ within a body. If the world, if God, if all that we are is a large body, then each of the wisdom traditions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism, and Baha'i, and native traditions, all of these are like different organs within that great body. And imagine how well we would live if we only had a heart, but we didn't have a kidney or lungs, or all of these other vital organs, a brain within our bodies. So bit about Reb Zalman, and when I knew him, he was quite old and a little bit infirm early on in our relationship, but he was still like a person with such joy, and I think the joy really flows to his writing of Psalms. So I encourage you to take another look at Psalm 27 when you have a chance, whether it's this translation or I wanted to, when I saw this in your Machzor, I said to Rabbi Francine, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you included Reb Zalman. And she said, well, I think my people would like to hear a little bit about Reb Zalman. So instead of reading Psalm 27, I share with you some words about Reb Zalman. And we'll move on to page 10, to Baruch She'amar. This is the beginning verses of praise of Pesukei Zimra. And this opening, I think, is, if you had to encapsulate Judaism on one foot, I think the way in which we treasure words and the ways in which we understand that words have power and consequence are at the very heart of our wisdom tradition. And Baruch She'amar tells us that God spoke the world into existence. And I think it's important that we think about how we speak worlds into existence. Baruch Hu, Baruch Hu, oh, Baruch Shamar v'haya haolam, Baruch Oseh v'reishit, Baruch Omer ve'oseh, Baruch Gozer Umkayem, Baruch Merachem al haaretz, Baruch Merachem al haberiyot, Baruch Meshalem Zachar Tov L'Reav, Baruch Hayam L'Netzach, Baruch Podeh Umatzil, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo. So at the top of page 11, we have the words Ashrei Yoshvei Beitecha Od Yechlelu Chasala. And it's with joy that we sit in this house, and that we lift up our voices in praise. Yechlelu Chasala. One of my teachers said, "Why, when we say Amen, and then we also say Selah, what's the difference between Amen and Selah?" She answered her own question. She said, Amen is basically saying, yeah, I agree with that. And Selah is like saying, wow. So this idea in prayer of having wow moments, and I'm sensing that we're moving toward a wow moment, but I'm like also sensing that we are sitting and we are where we are in this day. So let's make this a conversation, and we'll make sure that that I'm meeting your needs, and that we're moving through this morning and we're getting a lift from this morning. So there is a song from my teacher, Reb Hannah Tiferet Siegel, where she just uses this first line, Ashrei Yoshvei Beitecha Od Yehalalu Chasela. And then she has English. Her English is joyous. Dwelling in the one, home is in my heart. It goes like this. It's a little bit of a call and response. So let's try it. So I'll say Ashrei, you say Ashrei, and when we get to joyous, you say joyous. Ashrei, Yoshvei Beitecha Od Yehalalu Chasela. Ashrei, Yoshvei Beitecha Od Yehalalu Chasela. Joyous, dwelling in the one, home is in my heart. Joyous, dwelling in the one, Chasela. Ashrei, Od Yehalalu Chasela. Joyous, dwelling in the one, home is in my heart. Joyous, dwelling in the one, home is in my heart. Ashrei, Yoshvei Beitecha Od Yehalalu. Ashrei, Yoshvei Beitecha Od Yehalalu Chasela. So let's move on with our joy and our hallelujah to page 15, to Psalm 150, the last psalm of the book of Psalms, and one that brings in the shofar, because remember, the shofar used to be an instrument that we used not just for this holiday and these days of awe, but also that we used to celebrate. We used it to sound the coming of the new moon, but we also used it as an instrument of celebration. So we have the shofar and the flute and the cymbals, and we have all of this way of bringing joy. So to the extent that we can bring joy up and out quietly this morning or loudly, let's do that. And do you know the tune? Hallelujah, hallelujah. Yay. Okay. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 Beki Auzo, hallelujah, Bikvulata, hallelujah, Kerov Gudlo, hallelujah, Beteka Shofar, hallelujah, Benevel Bechinor. Hallelujah, 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 betokumachol. Hallelujah, 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 beminim beugav. Hallelujah, betziltzlei shema. Hallelujah, betziltzlei truah, kol hanshema. Till hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Hallelujah. So let's finish this section, this Psuke de Zimra, these verses of praise, with the Chatzi Kaddish, found on page 17. Yitkadal v'yitkadash mei rabba, v'yama divra hirkei b'yamlit malchutei. V'chayechon uvyomechon u'chayetachal beit Yisrael b'agala u'bizman kariv v'meru amen. Yehei shmei rabba mivarach le'olam olamei almaya. Yitbarach, Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpa'ar, V'yitramam, V'yitnaser, V'yithadar, V'yitaleh, V'yitalal, Shemei Kedusha B'richu, Leila, Leila, Min Kol Birchata V'shir Chata. Tushbechata v'nechemata Damiran Bialma Vimeru. Amen. I invite you to stand, to rise for our call to worship, for our Baruch. We'll do this in the tune, the nusach of the Hagim. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai. Baruch et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam ha'olam. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ruach ha'olam yotzer or uvore choshech oseh shalom uvore et hakol. We have the words that are in the morning blessing. We have what I like to call a Shema sandwich. So a Shema sandwich, the Shema being the whatever it is that's your protein. And each day, both in the morning service and in the evening service, we have surrounding blessings for that protein. So if Shema is the protein, we have two blessings before, and we have one after. The two before, the first one is all about creation, the splendor of creation. And the second one is love, either ahavat olam or ahavat rabbah, either the love of all. What I love about olam is it's not just the universe, it's not just space, but it's also all time. So it's eternity and the universe all at once. So all time and space, love of all time and space, and the other, the very big love. So at night we have the very big love, and in the morning we have this opportunity to look at the miraculous nature of everything that's around us, including all of that which is within us. And then we have Shema, your protein, and then we have this blessing about redemption. So we always have those in every morning and every evening service. And so this morning, in addition, we have these beautiful words of Or Chadash, Al Tzion Ta'ir, V'nizkechu lanu mehera le'oro. And then we have the Chatima, the part that seals in the blessing, where it says Baruch Atah, and so on. So we look at Zion here as that place, that point, whether you think of it as Zion, the place, or you think of it as Zion, that place of when everything will be right with the world. When there will not be the war and the strife, but this new light that shines on Zion, that new light that hopefully brings us forward, calls us forward into that place. And I think at this time of year, there's always this sense that the light is changing, that we are moving toward the deep of winter. And that, again, we know in the spring that things will reemerge. So even in this time of pandemic and climate crisis and strife between and among people, neighbors even, that it's important to see that light and to be focused on that light. Oh, Chadash, Al Zion Tahir. Oh, Chadash, Al Zion Tahir. ונזכחו לנו במהרה לאורו ונזכחו לנו מהרה לאורו Yadadai, dai, 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 yadadai, dai, 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 yadadai, dai, 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 yadadai, dai, dai, yadadai, dai, 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 yadadai, dai, 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 yadadai, yai, dai, 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 yai, dai, dai, dai. Baruch atah Adonai Yotzer HaMeorot. And as we move into Ahava Rabbah on page 19, the tradition is to gather the fringes. And I think about this act with which I try to do daily. I try to daven every morning. I don't always. But when I do daven with my talit and I gather the fringes, it feels like a small act of moving toward the gathering of all people. So I invite you to gather your fringes, the people who are at the most remote edges of your life, the people that you haven't spoken to in a while, the people that you've had an argument with, the people that you feel really angry at. As I drove in this morning, I passed two signs that demanded that I honor life, and I do honor life. And I also very much honor a woman's right to know what is right for her body. So gather those people too. and let's read together in English at the bottom of page 19. Love abundant, love unstinting, our God, you have enfolded us in love. Tender compassion beyond all bound, your precious gift. Our fathers and mothers gave you their trust, and you gave them Torah, laws by which to live. For their sake, teach us as well. Grace us with your guidance. Loving Father, merciful Mother of all, grant us clear understanding that we may listen, learn, and teach, preserve, practice, and fulfill with love every lesson of your Torah. May learning
light up our eyes.
May our hearts embrace your mitzvot. Unite us in love and reverence for you, that we may never feel ashamed of our deeds. We have trusted in your great and holy name. Now let us celebrate at last the joy of your salvation, bringing into peace the earth. Lead us with upright pride to the land that is ours.
For you are God of miracles and wonders. From all the peoples of the earth, you sought us out.
Brought us here to your great throne.
So with love we acknowledge and proclaim that you are one. Our praise to you, Adonai. You have singled out your people Israel with love.
So I ask you, with a little trepidation, I ask you, you've just read this, and I'd like you to tell me how it feels to you. And speak loudly.
I love that it went back to the peoples before us.
Okay, so Lori says she loves that it went back to the people before us.
When I read that part, it was so inclusive.
Okay, so the inclusivity of like connecting us with past generations. Okay, anybody else? Go ahead.
I love loving Father, merciful Mother.
So the expansion of liturgy to not just be Avinu, marking. Yes.
I like the line that we may never feel ashamed of our deeds. That's very unconditional and very freeing. And then the very last line, you have singled out your people Israel. I felt the clothing.
Okay. So did everybody hear that? And if the people at home, I'm not going to repeat the whole thing, but Hillary, right? Okay, so Hillary said that there were things that she really loved about it. So it's like the perfect way to like get to the part that is hard, is to say, I liked this and I liked this, and then we got to this last line, where we say, Baruch atah Adonai habocher be'amo Yisrael be'ahava. So that we see in this liturgy the particularism within our Jewish wisdom tradition and not the universality that is also there, but that we don't at all feel. Well, wait, that's not true. Sounds like we felt that throughout a lot of this prayer. And then we got to this, you have singled out your people, Israel, with love. And that one is hard for me. It's part of the reason why when I started a Kehillah, we chose together to join the Reconstructionist movement, because Reconstructionism does a lot of the things that that Hillary mentioned in saying, I like that it said father and mother, and this idea of not gendering the divine, the way that Hebrew just naturally as a gendered language will give us those genders. And then we also know much of our tradition and most of the liturgy was set in place by the 7th century. So it's not, you've got a lot of modern liturgy in here in English, but the Hebrew is very, very old. And so we know that the people who wrote that were writing in a different time and for a different audience, and probably didn't include a lot of women. So I think it's important to both appreciate and honor our liturgy, and also to, especially when we read it in English, it's much easier when we read it in Hebrew, and then what we're saying, it just sounds really nice and has a nice cadence to it. When we bring in this particularism, it's difficult. And I also think it's something that we wrestle with. You wrestle with it here in Montana, that people are seeing us as a very particular group. And we sometimes enjoy being a very particular tribal community. It's one of the biggest things that people complain about when they're asked about organized religion. I mean, we have welcome tables and we go and we intentionally greet new people, and yet we know our ways. Even, for me, it's hard because you have your songs and I'm obviously not singing them. so I think, just holding that tension between particularity and universality, and knowing that it exists within our tradition, and knowing that it exists within our modern life as well. And where do we put that? How do we place that? So I invite you once again to gather all of those fringes, because we're going to head from here into this word that when I was growing up was called the watchword of our faith. And as I have grown my Jewish journey, you really do, as I was explaining the Shema sandwich, it's the protein, to me, it's the DNA of what it means to be a Jew, to pay attention, as we talked last night, American Sign Language, pay attention. Listen and hear are too small. It's really paying attention. And then Yisrael, God wrestlers. That is our inheritance. Adonai is in place of Yud He Vav He, which is an ineffable name of the divine. So it's far bigger than anything that we can name. Put in there whatever you're accustomed to doing, or try out something new. Eloheinu, our God. Taking ownership of the relationship that we have with the divine. And then again, this ineffable name of the divine, and Echad. Echad doesn't just mean one. It also means soul, S-O-L-E, or only, or everything. It's this word that allows us to see the godliness in everything. That there's a God above, but there's also a God within. There's an immanent God as well as the transcendent God. And the transcendent God often is hard for us because it's a God of on a throne in heaven, ruling, being an arbiter. Oh, that's all of the language that we have for the Yamim Noraim. So the God force, the Godding that goes on in between and among us, this also is the Echad. So I invite you into Shema. We'll go on to the first paragraph of the Hafsa in the Torah trope, and then we'll conclude with the final words of the third paragraph, Lema'an Tizkaru, on page 22. We'll go right to Michamocha, and we'll end there. Shema Yisrael Havaya Eloheinu Adonai ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובמלאכתך בדרך ובשכבך וקשרתם לאות על ידך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך. למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, וחייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. From Egypt you redeemed us, God. From the slave house you set us free. For this, the people who felt your love exalted you, and the ones whom you found precious sang hymns of praise, blessing, and thanks to the living God who reigns forever. High and exalted, inspiring wonder, who humbles the proud and raises the lowly, who frees the captive and redeems the oppressed and sustains the poor. God responds to the cry of our people, our prayer in times of need. Sing praise to God Most High, most blessed source. Moshe uMiriam shira bishmicha rabba ve'amru kulam. Mi chamocha b'helim Adonai, mi kamocha netar b'kodesh, nora tehilot osefela. שירה חדשה שיבחו גאולים לשמך על שפת הים, יחד כולם הודו והמלכו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. צור ישראל, קומה בעזרת ישראל, ובטחינו ממך יהודה וישראל. גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל. Baruch atah Adonai, God Israel. So we move into the Amidah, and this Amidah for the Yamim Noraim is filled with lots and lots of our very sacred prayers for this season, including the Unetana Tokef. And instead of offering, I wrote two sermons for today, but I'm going to throw them both out. And I'm just going to share a quick devar about the Unetana Tokef. And then we'll move quickly-ish through the Amidah. I would do a creative Amidah and just let each of you go and do your own Amidah, but I want that to be okay with you, because I really want to get us to Torah and Shofar. So this is sort of, I hope this is okay. This is what I do with my congregation in Columbus. When we get to a point in the service and we know there is so much service and not as much time. So I want to just check with you. Who would like to do a full Amidah? And please be honest. Oh, okay. Wow. Okay. So then maybe we don't even have to talk about the Unetana. Well, maybe I'll just share a little bit because it's in there and you'll come to it. And then I'd invite you to, you do whatever feels good to you. But we're going to look at the Amidah, each of us individually,
so that we can get to Torah and Shofar this morning. Amidah is standing, right? It's a standing prayer. And if you would like to walk, if you'd like to do your own tefillah, as you walk around this beautiful space, please do that. And then at some point, I'll start to sing Shalom Rav or something like this, and we'll come back. We'll know that we're coming back. But I'm going to share these words with you about Unatana Tokef, because it's in here. Unatana Tokef, which, you know, when I first talked to your rabbi, to Rabbi Francine, it was already, we were on the 6th day of Elul, so we were well into the month, and that makes it very clear that she agonized over a decision to step away for the Hagim, and I'm so glad that she did, and that my friend Rabbi Lori Franklin in Missoula connected us so that I could hear, so that I could be for her a presence to hear what tumbled out of her mouth. And one of the first things she said is, I just can't do Unatana Tokef this year. And why? Because this is a really heavy piyut, a liturgical poem that is frequently inserted into, well, that is always, inserted into the Amidah, and is frequently described as troubling or worse. It is, there's a paragraph that I pulled from my Jewish learning, which explains its historical context this way. Although there are popular legends concerning the origins of this piyut, we do not know who wrote it. The structure of the poem and its language suggest that it was composed during the Byzantine period. Does anyone know when the Byzantine period was? Okay, just a long time ago. The concepts on which it is based parallel Christian writings based on similar sources, the most famous of which is the Dies Irae. For anyone who's ever sung in a choir or knows choir music, the Dies Irae within the Mass is just all about the wrath of a day of reckoning, which offers a vivid description of the day of judgment for all of humankind. In Unatana Tokef, however, the subject is not the final judgment, but the much more immediate yearly day of judgment. Unatana Tokef Kedushat Hayom, we shall ascribe holiness to this day. And then we say, Rosh HaShanah Yikatevun, Uviyom Tzom Kippur Yikatemun. Mi Yiryeh Umi Yamut. So on Rosh Hashanah, water, stoning, sword. It doesn't get to all of those things that would really touch a nerve for us, who by cancer, who by COVID. And then it illustrates how this determination will be made, utilizing imagery of God as a just and thoughtful shepherd, reviewing each sheep in the flock as it passes by. And perhaps this imagery resonates for you. And perhaps it doesn't. And if it doesn't, like it doesn't always for me, there is likely something in the words or a melody that you remember from sitting in services as a child at this time of year that strikes a deep chord. And before any modern this liturgical poem about God as shepherd and arbiter, I invite you to consider the very heart of this piyut, of this poem. Utshuva, utfila, utzdaka, ma'avirin et ro'a hagzera. And tshuva
and tefillah and tzedakah put off fear of the decree. It doesn't say put off the decree. It says put off fear of the decree. So how much time do we spend when we know that something may happen or something will happen? How much time do we spend with the fear, with the what if? What if we could put off that fear? What if by doing this formula that we are given to utilize no matter what the coming year holds in store for us, what if we use this tshuva, change and return, tefillah, prayer and connection? Tefillah is not just about the words of our mouth, it's about creating connection, which is why I think that this will be a good amidah for us. Tzedakah, which doesn't mean charity. Caritas is charity. Tzedakah is about the gift of giving. Plan for this world as if you expect to live forever, counsels the sage Ibn Jibral. But plan for the hereafter as if you expect to die tomorrow. We walk the tightrope on these Yamim Noraim, these days of awe, between who shall live and who shall die. And we note the nuances of God's hand and our own doing in creating for each of us our destiny. We know that, as I say in the Yiddish expression, human beings make plans and God laughs. Or as my grandmother used to say, man proposes, God disposes. But we also know that to live fully, we must live in partnership with the author of the book of life and with each other. So I invite you to see Unatana Tokef when you get to it or when you hear it. Unatana Tokef Kedushat Hayom, or however you heard it in your story, in your Jewish journey. Hear it not as antiquated liturgy, but as a living formula for rejuvenating how we can engage life fully by living with greater intention and clarity. So with this, I invite you to rise for our Amidah. Yananai lai 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 Adonai. Yananai lai 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 Svatai Tifta. Yananai lai 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 Hufi Yagid. Hufi Yagid Tehilatecha. Yananai lai 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 Adonai. Yananai lai 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 Fatai Tifta. Yananai lai 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 Ufi Yadi. Ufi Yadi Tehilatecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, page 39. Avinu Malkeinu, Chanenu ve'anenu, ki emanu ma'asim. Asehimanu, tzedakah v'chesed. Asehimanu, tzedakah v'chesed, v'choshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Chanenu ve'anenu, ki en banu ma'asim. Avinu Malkeinu, may we taste anew the sweetness of this day, of each day. Renew for us a year of goodness. Together, where do I find moments of sweetness and beauty? As a new year begins, where will I devote my best energies? How can I bring more goodness to the lives of others? That brings us to Torah. You can sit for a moment, and I do want to take out the Torah this morning, but we're going to do something very different, which I was given permission to do for our Torah service, and we'll do that. We'll take maybe 15 minutes for our Torah service, and then we'll do the shofar call, or we'll just see how we're feeling about doing for Torah. And if we want to talk a little bit more with one another, we'll do that, and we'll see how it goes. So I do want to take out the Torah this morning, and for that, I am going to invite Lori and Brian Alter forward. I am told that because of all of the learning that Lori has experienced through this community, through this kehillah, that is what, not yet. that is why, is that correct? But here, I'm gonna put on my
I'm fine. Okay.
Yes.
Then I'm not. I'll just stay here.
That's great.
Do you want to share, just from your words into the microphone, why you decided that you would get a new dress for the new year for the Torah? She's very happy.
Absolutely. I am so honored. And
Right up there.
okay, I am so honored to do this. And last night when I saw the Torah covering, I did start to cry a little bit. Last year, I fulfilled my dream of becoming a bat mitzvah on the top of the mountain and read from Torah in front of God and everybody in the middle of COVID. And that was due to a long time of learning, and especially with our rabbi and our community. And I wanted our Torah to have a holiday covering, and I knew that was what I wanted my gift to be.
Thank you so much. So yay, you're getting a sign language, yay, and thank you, and cheers for that. So please, and this is a group thing. I want to make sure that before we put the Torah away, because we're not going to open it up and read it this morning, but before we put it away, I want to make sure that while it is in our presence, that we say a mishaberach, that we say prayer for healing, and in particular for the entire community, and most certainly for Rabbi Francine, and your kindness to her in allowing her in this sabbatical year, in this release year of Shemitah, to take a sabbatical, to take care of herself, because rabbis, we tend to be very concerned about other people, and we tend to take care of them before we take care of ourselves. And it's really a gift from a community to say to their rabbi, you take. So see, you all give me goosebumps, that you just so willingly just said, yes, go and be and do what you need to do for yourself. So we're going to start on page 40, and I'm just going to do a little bit of this just to give the Torah its due, because the Torah is a special object. And although we do not worship objects, it is not just the scroll with the beautiful covering, talit, that you have given to her for the Hagim, but it's also all of, and when we say Torah, we're not just referring to the scrolls in the Ark. We're referring to all of the white fire, as Rabbi Mitch Chaffetz wrote some really great books, and he calls that which surrounds the black letters on the parchment, the white fire. That's our Torah. That's what our sages looked at and gave to us. And we are constantly, it's not like we go back and we say, oh, Rosh, what Rashi said, that's what we do. No, we have conversations across the ages. As Hillary was, both of you, Lori and Hillary, both mentioned this, like the fact that there's a connection to our ancestors and a connection to our future as well. And when we read Torah, that moment on a mountain, amazing. No matter where you read Torah, there is, it's as if, for me at least, you're in some kind of vortex wind tunnel where you're connected, like you feel that energy from what's behind you and what's moving forward. So when we take this out with a bit of pomp and circumstance, it's because it is our Torah. It's this item, this ritual item represents everything that is our Torah unfolding. Ein kamocha v'Elohim Adonai v'ein kamasecha malchutecha malchut kol olamim u'memshaltecha bechol dor v'dor. Adonai melech, Adonai malach.
Adonai yivarech et amo b'shalom. Av harachamim chetiva v'rtzoncha et Zion. Tivne chomot Yerushalayim. Tivne chomot Yerushalayim. Ki v'cha levad vatachnu. Melech Elram v'nisa Adon olamim. Kuma Adonai v'yafutzu oivecha v'yanusu mifanecha mipanecha. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah. Udavar Adonai mirushalayim. Baruch Hu shenatan Torah, Torah. Baruch Natan Torah, Torah. La'amo Yisrael b'kedushato. Now we come to at the top of page 41. I'm going to just grab you. So at the top of page 41, we have these words, and I love that we say these words at the center of our taking out of Torah. That we say these words that are actually words that God reminds God's self. And Moshe reminds God when God is angry that God is an open vessel of loving attributes. God is ever present. Rachum. God is womb-like. Rechem is womb. Rachamim is compassion. So God is compassionate and gracious and patient. Erech Apayim, often slow to anger is what it says. Erech Apayim is like a long face. You know how like if a dragon in the fairy tales, the dragon has a really long nose, and so it takes a long time for the fire to come out the dragon. That's always what I think of when I think of Erech Apayim. Like I want to be slow to anger like that. Like by the time it gets to my nostrils, I've dealt with it. I'm not always so good at that, but anyway. So all of these beautiful attributes that God has to be reminded of. I love this God that reminds us that we are full of imperfections and that we can have mantras that we say to ourselves to remind ourselves that we have lots and lots of good qualities. So let's sing this together, these words of, this is a Ashkenazi version. I won't lay the Sephardic version on you, but it's interesting to note that the Sephardic version is very different and it's like Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun Erech. I mean, it's like, hey, God, wake up. But ours is like a lullaby. So we're gonna go with the Ashkenazi version this morning. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, B'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Noseh Chesed La'alafim, Noseh Avon B'Fesha, V'chata v'naker, Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Notzer Chesed La'alafim, Notzer Avon B'Fesha, V'chata v'naker. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Notzer Chesed La'alafim, Notzer Avon V'Fesha, V'chata v'naker. Now I'm going to ask that the two of you call out to us, if you would, the Shema and the. Would you like me to do it with you, or do you do it yourselves? And then we'll all turn east, and do the Gadlu Ladonai Iti and Romemo. And we won't have. I don't think we're not going to do a hakafa. I was told. What? Do you want to do a hakafa? No. Okay. So if anyone wants to come up and make personal contact with the Torah, I invite you to do that while the Torah is here and while we're doing a little bit of Torah telling. So I'm going to ask you to call out and we will respond.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh B'Dorah Shemo.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh V'Norah Shemo. Gadol Adonai Iti, U'Neromema Shemo Yachdav. Lecha Adonai HaGedula v'Hagibura v'Hatiferet v'Hanetza v'Chachmut. Ki ho b'shamayim u'ba'aretz, ki ho b'shamayim u'ba'aretz. Adonai ha'mamlecha v'ha'mitnaseh l'chol Rosh. Romemu, Romemu, Adonai Eloheinu. Ve'hishachavu, ve'hishachavu, lehadom raglav. Romemu, 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 Adonai Eloheinu. Ve'hishachavu, ve'hishachavu, lehar kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. Thank you, Brian. Okay, can be seated. Now that the Torah is seated, and let's just, because we are reading Torah, let's just do an aliyah together before we do our Torah reading for this morning. And just so that you can be thinking about it, I'm going to need 5 volunteers who like to read with a dramatic flair. I'm sorry that Rabbi Setchar is not here this morning, because I understand he's quite dramatic. And I am sure we can all step up our game. So let's call out our Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamborach. Baruch Adonai Hamborach leolam va'ed. Baruch Adonai Hamborach leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bachar banu im kol ha'amim. V'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. So for that inclusivity, Hillary, that you were speaking of, when I do this bracha, when I do this blessing, I do it in a style that I learned from Reb Zalman, which is Asher Bachar Banu. We say Mikol, who has brought us forth from all other people, who has separated us out from all other people. He says, and you can sing it exactly the same way. He changes me, which is from, to im, which is with. So im kol ha'amim, who has made us special with all other people. So you decide, and you're always allowed to go with your Jewish particularism or your Jewish universality. I just wanted to give you that possibility if you had never heard it before. So now, I'm gonna need this. Can I just, where is he? Hopefully I can just take it out. Yep, okay. All right, so I need a Hagar, someone who will be Hagar. You don't have to be, and we're not gonna, you can be gender non-binary, so Hagar does not need to be a woman, but Hagar was a woman. So I need a Hagar. Who's Hagar? Come on up. Thank you. I need a Sarah. Sarah. Good. Thank you. I see in the person sitting next to you. Who was the person sitting next to you? I can see in her eyes that she's coming up. You see it. She almost came up for Sarah, but she didn't. I could see it. Okay. Will you be Abraham? Yeah. Excellent. Okay. I need a Yitzhak. You have a very small part. Will you come? Okay. Sure. And then I need an Ishmael. Who will be Ishmael? Thank you. So the Torah reading for the first day of Rosh Hashanah is not the one that we're used to about the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. I grew up with that as my first day, my only day of Rosh Hashanah. It's actually this story, which is the story of Hagar, who bears the first son of Abraham, because Sarah
and Abraham, they're very old. And they've been told that they're going to be a great nation. And in order to be a great nation, they need to have kids. And so Hagar is Sarah's maidservant. You know this story, right? Okay. So now we're going to hear the story from the people in it. And then I'm going to ask you to think in your groups, or maybe you find someone and you go off and you're 6 feet apart and you're able to have a conversation, or we have a group conversation about how does this white fire, how does this story that's unfolding this morning work for you? So I'm going to start with Hagar. And I'm going to ask you to read this. Yeah. Well, hello, I'm Hagar. Your text calls me Hagar the Egyptian. Seriously? I've been a member of this household for 20 years. I speak their language, I eat the same food, I've shared joys and sorrows with this family, and so did Ishmael. We were a part of this family. My name also means the wanderer and the convert. But why not just call me Hagar? Why do you need to make these distinctions at all? I have seen what happens when people get categorized and lumped in a big group as less than, unworthy, other. It's really easy to dismiss us then. I had become one of them. I had become one of you. And yet you still need to categorize me as other. Seriously, I allowed my son Ishmael to be the first kid ever to be circumcised, and by his father, no less. That's got to count for something. Yet, now, all of a sudden, your story demotes me. I'm again the foreigner, so that you can make Sarah the visionary rather than the, well, enough of all that hurt and anger.
I knew it was important that we have a child to carry on this monotheism that Abraham and I have taken on. I mean, it would be pretty ridiculous to have done all that traveling for the God who speaks to my husband, giving him all kinds of grand ideas about becoming a great and populous nation, and then not have a kid, right? And although I'm okay with this God stuff, I'm also a skeptic. I wasn't getting pregnant, so I got creative. I gave Hagar, my maidservant, to Abraham to plant his seed somewhere fertile, and it worked. So everything was just fine. We have Ishmael, and we're one big happy family, and then God goes and makes the most absurd promise that I'm going to become pregnant. Ha! I've lived a long, hard life. I'm tired. But then, bam, I'm pregnant. Ha! Have you ever heard anything so outlandish? When my son was born, I called him Yitzhak, which means laughter because, well, who wouldn't laugh at a fertile octogenarian? Ishmael, a sweet kid, until, of course, he became a surly teenager. And you know teens, I didn't want him around the baby. Bad influence. So I told Abraham to send him and his mother the Egyptian way. We didn't need them anymore.
Oi! What serious stories I've going on. I'm 100 years of age and have 2 beautiful boys. You'd think this would bring a man such nachos, such joy. I thought we were doing so well. Everyone was getting along, and I've had lots of time lately to really get in touch with God. You know, it takes a lot of time to cultivate a relationship with that one. Shows up in the strangest of places and asks me to do all kinds of stuff. But I'm really a faithful guy. I want to pass all the tests. So, as I was saying, everything was going well in my marriage. Sarah had forgiven me for passing her off as my sister and letting that Pharaoh take her off to this place when we were in Egypt. What can I tell you? I get a little nervous around powerful people. Tend to do whatever they tell me to. Look, it's kept me safe this far, and you know I've done a lot of traveling in pursuit of this relationship with God. Now, Sarah tells me to cast out my son and his mother, our servant, my baby mama. Doesn't that seem awfully harsh to you? And then God tells me, Don't worry. Do whatever your wife tells you. Seriously? I mean, it's one thing when she tells me to ask for directions, but this? But like I said, I get nervous around powerful people. I do what they tell me.
Hi, I'm just a little boy at this point, and I don't have much to tell you. I don't know what all the commotion is all about, but I know I am pretty special. I wish they could send my brother and Hagar away. They were really nice, and Hagar took care of me too. My mom and dad are really old, you know. Who's going to take care of me now?
You think you know the whole story, right? I mean, your Torah tells you, right? Well, no. It actually tells you next to nothing about me, because I'm Ishmael. It is only later, filling in the white fire, the places in Torah where there is no writing, and you have to figure it out for yourself, that your sages start to say that I was doing something inappropriate with my baby brother Isaac. Of course, this is just a story. They make up because otherwise your matriarch, Sarah, and your patriarch, Abraham, would look pretty nasty and weak. My baby brother got all the attention as if he were some kind of royal prince. From the moment he was born, my life was basically worthless. So they sent me and my mom off into the wilderness to die. Great story, right? Well, maybe you can learn something from it.
Thank you to all of our actors. Stay up there for just a moment because I first want to ask you what did you learn in this little drama? Either about yourself in your role or yourself more expansively or somebody else. Just pass it down if somebody has something to say. You don't have to have something.
Well, I think it's interesting because I come from a family of four kids. I'm number three. My wife and I have four kids, so we've kind of gone through this. And then we've also been blessed by having four exchange daughters. And so we brought four 16-year-old girls into our house. And as Lori's heard me say several times, doesn't matter what country they come from, a 16-year-old girl is a 16-year-old girl. But listening to the comparison, how Ishmael felt about his baby brother getting all the attention and seeing that still continue today in so many families, as you know, my parents used to say you should have the first child and then use that as practice and then create your family because there's no lessons otherwise. It's interesting to see how Ishmael responded to all this, and that I didn't realize there was that much time difference between Ishmael and Isaac.
Yeah, Ishmael was the team when Isaac was born. And now, granted, that's my right. It's like, so this is not necessarily how Ishmael thought. This is how I think Ishmael may have thought.
He's a teenager.
So, okay, anyone else? You don't have to have a, yeah.
Well, what I'm struck by is that we are told they were special people, we're chosen. But what the story is telling us is there's this dichotomy between this being a chosen people, but there's a universal lesson, and we need to be more inclusive. And that's something that I think we all struggle with.
I had never really contemplated the experience of Hagar and the oppression that she faced within her family. And then I'm also thinking, if the goal is to create a plentiful people, why would you choose a really old man to get that started? So I'll think about that.
And I often wondered how Sarah was able to say, off with you, I'm done with you. That never made much sense to me.
What struck me about Abraham is that he really lacked a backbone, and that it seemed like he had the feeling that this wasn't the right thing to do, but he felt powerless in a way and just went along with it without standing up for his own beliefs.
Well, and of course, the next day, the second day of Rosh HaShanah, we read about the binding. We read about Abraham being willing to lay his only son on an altar for slaughter. And, I think it's a very interesting story for a very free-thinking people to have to wrestle with. And I think that's why we're not given these stories, because, in my opinion, people will say to me, Rabbi, do you believe all of this is true? And I'll say, yes, but I don't believe it's factual. There's a real difference. Like, when you read the stories in Torah, there is a lot of truth in them. Just like Brian was saying, he could hear his modern kids in the sibling rivalry. And this is not the only place where we have sibling rivalry. Of course, we've got Cain and Abel, and we've got the ways in which Isaac takes his brother's birthright. And there's all kinds of ways in which we see negative behavior in our patriarchs and matriarchs. And I think that is to help us to behave better, to see in ourselves those ways in which we behave poorly, and to learn from that so we don't get perfect people in Torah. Is there anybody else who has something? You can do a Phil Donahue or an Oprah Winfrey for those who are in a different generation. Anybody else have something to say about what you've witnessed? You just want to go home. Okay. I just want to make sure.
Well, I love that you bring up, kind of embracing or acknowledging the negative, but again, I'm probably a little biased since I'm holding a little one on my lap. The dichotomy or the juxtaposition between the carelessness of young life and the worship of it. So you're willing to throw away, or you put people at the brink of an edge to either sacrifice their children or send away a son. And a group of people, or then now a 3,000 plus year old religion that is supposed to love children and family. That's a really hard thing to wrestle with, especially at the head of the new year. Like, where's the sweetness in any of that?
You have anything to say?
No.
Okay. Anyone else want to respond to that or have another idea? Why are we given this story? What do you get from this story?
It's a real conflict.
It's a real conflict in terms of thinking about both sides. And it's very interesting the way you're presenting it, because, you just sort of accept these stories as you go along as a kid, and now you're questioning, which is...
Sorry.
No, it's good. I think questioning is an excellent thing. I think we all do have to ask questions. We don't always like the answers, but you should ask.
And until now, I would have said that the story was to me about faith. God said, you will be the father of this nation, and there was faith that would happen. But I never really, until more recently, didn't look at that any deeper.
And you made the comment a minute ago that Abraham bound his only son Isaac to be. It's not his only son.
Right.
This
exactly.
was a time of polygamy, not a time of monogamy. I can't imagine sending off a wife and a child and just abandoning him in that way. It's just, I guess I'm too much of a family guy to ever imagine that. Yeah.
Right.
Gee.
But there's also a very strong sense of bitterness, because with the near sacrifice of Isaac, Sarah turned away from Abraham, and they were no longer together. And that's always struck me as a very sad end to this story.
So it's the start of a new year, and we're contemplating our goals and our intentions of who we want to be. And so for me, the experience of reading a story and saying, no, that's not
how I will make my choices. That can feel empowering as opposed to reading a story that says, okay, I'll make my choices like that. Instead, to hear an example of who we don't want to be as a people, and acknowledge that our people have been that in the past, that can empower us to make our own empowered choices. Anyone else? What I appreciate about this story being our story is, in particular, not just the imperfections, but in this story, I feel like it's very appropriate for the 21st century and the way we are doing Jewish. Because Hagar sounds an awful lot like Ha-ger. So we call a person who chooses Judaism. We call a person who chooses Judaism a ger. Right? And we translate that as convert. But you heard, will you read again what you are?
A wanderer.
A wanderer
and a
yeah. Oh,
yeah, wanderer and a convert.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
You got it.
So yeah,
you already gave me the
I wanted to make sure. So somebody who, we have a lot of people in our communities who are with us, who come and participate in Jewish life with us, who are what I like to call Jew curious or Jewish adjacent, people who live in a way that is very much like the way that we lived when we were tribal people, and also just after the fall of the Second Temple. We were also much more Jews the way we are today than this kind of purist form of Judaism, where it's only by matrilineal descent that you get your blood connection to this people. We are a people of Gerim Toshav, people who behave as if they are Jewish, who haven't yet become Hager, the person who has committed, I usually say committed whole hog, and then I regret it, but who have deeply committed and made that decision to convert. And then we, Jews, I feel, make a huge mistake because we call those people, what do we call somebody who converted? Thank you, that's much better. Usually people will answer convert. Like, that's how I grew up. Like, my mom would say, oh, so-and-so's a convert. Now, when anybody says that to me, I say, no, so-and-so is a Jew. Like, once somebody has converted to Judaism, it's their choice to explain their Jewish journey. It's not ours to label them. And that is what's going on, I think, in this story, is that Hagar, all of a sudden, she has been a ger toshav. She has been living among and with this family. She has been behaving as part of this tribe. This was long before we were called Jews, but this tribe, Bnei Israel, the people of Israel, the children of Israel, and now all of a sudden she becomes other. And we talk a lot in the 21st century about the ways in which we other people, all kinds of ways, that we belittle people. Oh, they're illegal. No, they're undocumented, but they're people, and we need to see people as people and let them tell their own stories. And I think what we learn from this story is almost the reverse of what we learn in the black words of Torah. So in the words that are on the page, what we learn is that this is a trial of Abraham, and these are the things that have to be done, and that Sarah is kind of protecting her progeny. And there's more to the story, and I think there's always more to Torah, and that's what I was hoping to bring forward with this morning, is to see that there's always more to Torah, and it's ours to question. And boy, oh boy, are we a people with questions. And that's what I love about being Jewish, because it's all about asking the questions. I don't have to have the answers. So I hope that this was good Torah for you this morning, and I thank our actors. Bravo. And let's do a Misha Berach while we have the Torah out. Actors and actors, all of you may go back to your seats if you'd like. And the words for Debbie Friedman's Misha Berach, I don't know what I did with my service. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Is that, yes, no. Yeah, no. Thank you. I had one that's marked up, but I'm going to use it. No, it's okay. I will figure it out. Because coming in for a land. Thank you for handing it to me, Tom, with exactly where we are. On page 46. And what's her name? Darcy. Do you want to come do this with me? Darcy? Paging Darcy. Darcy, do you want to come over here and do this with me? I need somebody to touch the Torah.
I'm not saying she dressed exactly like Sarah.
Can you put your hand right here on the Torah so that somebody in our community is touching it? You want to rub? You can rub it. Feel what it feels like. We've got some nice fringes here. Yeah. Okay. So my understanding is that you start with the first verse, and then I'm going to look around the community, and you'll share names of people that you want to have the communal energy that we have here for healing, and then we'll do the second paragraph. Is that correct? Is that your minhag, your custom? Good. Okay. Misha Beirach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha Limotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen.
Michael Bell.
Help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Misha Beirach Imotenu Mekor HaBracha Lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, a renewal of body, a renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen. We need to put the Torah back into the ark. So I invite somebody who feels called to lift the Torah place it back in the ark.
And I'm gonna ask, can you take off your whistle?
Yes.
Yeah. So you probably want to.
Sure.
If anybody finds the page before I do. Oh, you know what? We have shofar calling before we put it away. So would you be Marvin?
Starvin' Marvin.
Starvin' Marvin.
Starvin' for the Torah.
Okay. Marvin, would you be okay to like hold the Torah's heavy? Are you okay to hold it all of the shofar blast?
I'm a heavy hitter.
All right.
We got the right guy for the job.
Okay. So now, what I am thinking that we're going to do is we're going to start with
the blessing. And then, why am I having so much trouble with this book? Where does it open to so that so we're going to do the blessing on page 52. And then I am going to, I'm going backwards. That's why it's so hard. I am going to skip to the calling of the show. Is there someone who feels capable of calling the callings of the shofar, the tekiah, shvarim, truah, tekiah? Starts on page 53. It is not in transliteration, but they're only 3 words. And if you know a little bit of Hebrew, or I could call and I could blow, but I think that's kind of, will you do it? Yay, Brian. Okay. So Brian's going to come up and he's going to call while I blow, and we're going to blow through all of the blowing of shofar. Do you usually do all 100 blasts? Oh, okay. Well, good. So then I usually do, but I don't usually blow. But let's find the one that has Tekiah Gedolah, because that's a good one. Okay. So but this doesn't have any shvarim. Okay, so let's do. Brian, you're going to come up and you're going to do the calls first on 55 and then on 57. Then we get a shvarim. So what that means is that first we're going to bless, because this blessing is super groovy, because it's a blessing about hearing. And I lost where it is. Where did I say it was, Tom?
52.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So let's do this blessing and think about the sound that we hear. I think frequently our response, although you are great. Last night when we heard the call of the shofar, you were silent afterwards, which was really great, because when we breathe in, first there's a deep silence before we make any sound, whether we're blowing shofar or speaking or singing or sighing. And then there's the out breath with the words or the blast of the instrument or the sigh. And then there's that silence. And that silence that's the sweetness. Who said, where's the sweetness of the new year? That I think, in the silence, after hearing the blast, because it's not always perfect. The blower doesn't always get it right. And to just be in that moment, in that So let's say together this blessing for Lishmoa Kol Shofar, for hearing the voice of the shofar. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lishmoa kol shofar. And let's say a Shehechianu, because we were going to say a Shehechianu about the new Torah cover. So now we've got the new Torah cover and this first hearing of the shofar. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechianu v'kimanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Amen. So you. So no, it continues, but
Right.
you could do that, and then as long as the last one you do the dola. Yeah, let's do that. I'm gonna blow out this.
One word at a time or the whole sentence?
Oh yeah, one word at a time. One at a time, please.
Tekiah. Shabarim. Teruah. Tekiah.
I've been doing this all of Elul. All of Elul.
Tekiah. Shabarim.
Some water on your lips.
I'm sorry.
You're doing great. You're the jack of all trades, master of all.
Reminds me of the story. Why? Sorry.
We can do the story.
She's looking at me like, what are you doing?
Teruah.
I can hear it. Get a good embouchure. Oh my gosh, you guys.
Well, let's do the story instead. It'll open the gates just as well.
I have been doing this every morning of the month of Elul, thinking about being with you in the mountains and blowing shofar. And I really want to blow shofar for you. It's such a gift. And there's a Hasidic story about a man who is designated to blow shofar for the service in which the Baal Shem Tov is sitting. And he has all of these kavanot, all of these intentions for how best to blow the shofar, how beautifully to blow the shofar in his breast pocket. And all through the service, he's like touching his breast pocket and feeling all of those intentions. And he gets up to blow shofar, and there is no sound that comes out. And he is devastated, kind of like how I feel right now. And the Baal Shem Tov says to him, there is no more beautiful sound than the sound of a broken heart. But I really want to blow shofar for you, and I will try one more time. But yeah.
Teruah. Tekiah. Tekiah. Shibarim. Teruah. Tekiah. Tekiah. Shibarim. Tekiah. Tekiah. Shibarim. Tekiah. Tekiah. Shibarim. Tekiah. Tekiah. Teruah. Tekiah. Tekiah. Teruah. Tekiah. Tekiah. Teruah. Tekiah Gadolah. There you go. All good.
Okay. It's Chaim Pi, V'tom Hecha, Me'usha, Terachecha, Yarenu, V'chol Tivotecha, Shalom, Hashivenu, Adonai, Elecha v'noshuva, Chadesh, Chadesh Yameinu, Chadesh Yameinu, Ekedem.
Being from Dayton, Ohio, I can tell you it was not the chauffeur blower, it was the chauffeur.
Thank you. So let's conclude. We have the words of Aleinu on page 54. This is actually where those words were composed for. Those were Those were the words that appeared in this service for the first time, and then it became a part of our regular service. So a moment to just think about what it is when we say Aleinu l'shabeach, that it is upon us. Aleinu, it's upon us to move this forward. So this morning we've been through a lot together, and we've been through a lot individually to get us here. And I am grateful that you're still here. And so let's rise with a sense of purpose for what we will take from this service forward into our lives, and sing together the words of Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עצרנו כגויי ארצות, ולא שמענו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו ככם, וגורלנו בכל המונה. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ושמו I'm going to move us to page 59 for a prayer for the state of Israel. And I would like us to create this prayer as we go, rather than reading Avinu Shebashamayim. When you think about Eretz Yisrael, when you think about the state of Yisrael, and when you think about the people Yisrael. So those are three different things, right? There's the land, there's the biblical land that is ours. There's the nation state that was created in 1948. And then there's all of us, B'nai Yisrael, the people Yisrael. And our friends and neighbors sometimes get confused as to what it means to be B'nai Yisrael. And I think what it means to be B'nai Yisrael is that we wrestle with what it means to a connection, a deep, deep connection with this land, and a deep, deep connection with the state of Israel, and still to be unsure about some of the ways in which it, as a nation state, as a political state, behaves. And you would think that people would have a really easy time understanding this because we've lived through the last 4 years in a nation state where we might not have liked the way the government was behaving, and yet we still loved America. So I invite you to shout out your prayers for the state of Israel. And I will start. I pray for the people who make decisions in the state of Israel. May they be guided by kindness and compassion and concern for their safety and security, and also for the people who live in the land and all of the people who live in that land. And just a word. Blessed. Forgiveness. Shielded with your love. Humanity and compassion. empathy.
Strengthen the hands of those who defend our holy land.
Thank you.
Light unto the world.
Light unto the world. And a prayer for our own country. What will we pray for our own country? We pray for better conversations across difference. Listening.
Realizing that personal freedom does not mean a disregard for the rest of your community.
Learning that personal freedom does not mean a disregard for the rest of your community. A greater, go ahead.
Find a solution rather than dwelling on the problem.
Find a solution rather than dwelling on the problem.
Listen to learn.
Listen to learn.
Get vaccinated.
Get vaccinated. Take care of everyone and yourself all at the same time. Care for the earth that we live upon, and reminding ourselves all the time that it is not, although we might own a plot of land here or there, this does not belong to us. We need to care for it as if it belonged to our children and our children's children and their children, because it does. So I bring us to Mourner's Cottage. I invite you to sit for just a moment. And to appreciate the journey of where we've been, the change in the temperature from when we started to where we are now. Maybe the change in our heart, in our mind. Some of that release that I talked about last night with Shemitah, the release not only in the traditional sense of the land, to let it rest in a seventh year like we rest on a seventh day, but for ourselves, what are we going to release? And I'm going to work on releasing the fact that the shofar and my lips did not meet as lovers do this morning. And I really appreciate your kindness. I look forward to serving you in the coming days, to being with those of you who want to hike with us tomorrow. You have hopefully been in touch with Sally, or will be in touch with Sally, or will just meet us at the trailhead. For those of you who would like to use some of this incredible sunshine to braid your own Havdalah candle with me, we are going to do this at the Altar's home on Sunday at 3:30. You are not too young or too old. It's a really lovely practice, and I brought 75 tapers so that at least 15 people can braid a Havdalah candle. So please don't make me take those home. And then we'll meet again. Is there something before Kol Nidre? Okay, so then we'll meet again. Yeah, no. We'll meet again for Kol Nidre on Wednesday evening. It's a poignant moment. And then the gates will be open for 25 hours, whether we're here or not. But we'll have services through the day. I had offered last night that if anybody wants to talk about anything that comes up with the services or anything else that comes up, please come and see me and get my phone number so you can reach me while I'm here. I am staying at the Rostons' house and they're not here. although they'll be home just for a little bit over Shabbos. Oh, and Shabbat Shuvah, there'll be a Zoom Shabbat across Montana thing. So, so Zoom with us, myself and other rabbis. I know that that Rabbi Setcher also will be there on Zoom. So yeah, that's those are the announcements that I know of. So let's integrate everything that we have brought with us to this moment. And this time of year is a poignant time for reflecting and remembering the people who created us, the people whose shoulders we stand on, whether they were our own family, totally fine, whether they're our own family or they're somebody who really became family to us. So I invite you, there are people who are in either Shloshim, the first 30 days, Shloshim, anybody who's in the first year after the death, please stand and say the name of the person you lost and maybe just tell us a little bit of something about her. You didn't lose her. The person, because you didn't lose her. She's still a part of you.
Okay, her name is Betty, and what I'll say is she's the sweetest, kindest person.
Thank you, Ellen. Ellen's mother, Betty. And anyone else who's observing the art site? And if it's your custom to rise, either because that's just the way you have always done it, or because you rise for those who have no one to say Kaddish for them, we will conclude with the mourner's Kaddish and then a song to lift us. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah, ve'alma divra frutei v'yamlich malchutei, ve'chayechon uvyomechon uvchaye dechal beit Yisrael, Badala v'zman kari v'imru, Amen. Yehe shmei Rabbah mivarach le'olam omei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar, v'yithaleh, v'yithalal, shmei d'kudusha, parichu, le'ela, mi kol v'shchata, tushbechata v'nechamata, damiran v'alma v'imru, amen. Yehe shlam rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Yaseh shalom b'mamav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'imru, amen. We may the divine majesty that reigns prevail soon in our lives, in our days, in the life of the whole house of Israel, and in all of the people who dwell on earth. And we say, Amen. Adon olam asher malach, b'terem kol yitzir nivrach, leit nasa v'chefso kol, v'zay melech shemo nikra, v'acharei kichlot hakol, levado yimloch nora, v'hu haya, v'hu Vehu yeh b'tifara, vehu echad ve'ein sheni, aman shilo lehachbira, ve'li reshit ve'li tachlit, ve'lo ha'oz haman mizra, vehu eli ve'hai goali. V'tzur chevli v'hetzara, v'hu nisi umanos li, menat kozi v'yom ekra v'yado, af Atid Ruchi Pieti Sham Be'ahira Ve'im Ruchi Geviati Adonai Li Velo Ira. I wish you a pleasant night, a new year filled with na'im, with pleasantness, and with goodness, and with sweetness, and with reality, also with all of those things, with good health and well-being, with happiness and friendships to carry you through what is difficult. I wish great health to your Rabbi Francine, and may her family move through this difficult Mitzrayim, this narrow space, and come to the end of that Gesher Tsar Me'od, and it's not going to be so tsar, it's not going to be so narrow, this bridge that they cross, because they have all of you holding them beside them. So a very sweet and good new year to you all, and thank you for your patience and for your kindness and for your compassion. Shana Tova.
Oh, thank you.
Enjoyed yourself. Oh, okay.